Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to MALDEF's 2023 Chicago Gala Awards, brought to you by our National Gala sponsors. Adobe, Verizon, our co-chair, Vistria, our benefactor, Tall Ship Partners Fund, LLC, Simpson and Thatcher, Western Union, our patrons, Ropes and Gray, Winston and Strawn, LLP, our sponsors, Bakery Drinker, Hugh, Sokol, Piers Resnick, and DYM, Latham and Watkins, LLP, Sperling and Slater, the Hispanic Lawyers of Illinois, the University of Illinois at Chicago, the Institute for Latino Studies, University of Notre Dame, and our friends Azteca, and the Barbosa family.
MALDEF is pleased to present this short video from our National Gala sponsor, Verizon.
William in the 6th grade, from the beginning, he wanted to explore things.
My first time witnessing the Verizon Innovative Learning Program, Mr. Gonzalez put a robot in my hand.
He could speak, but he still didn't have that confidence.
For the City of the Future project, we presented what we would want Compton to be like.
These are ideas that are coming from them.
We're not just like moving away from the community, but actually going in and helping the community. We have hope. Now is the time to think about the future.
Damas y caballeros, please join me in welcoming MALDEF President and General Counsel and your host for this evening, Thomas Saenz.
Welcome, everyone. Now, those of you who have been with us for prior Chicago Awards galas are not used to seeing me at the very beginning of the program. But a funny thing happened on the way to finding an MC for this evening's gala. So MALDEF, though 55 years old, more on that in a moment, though 55 years old, MALDEF prides itself on being a very modern, technologically sophisticated organization. So here's what happened. We used AI and we programmed in to reach every demographic. What would we get if we combined Oscar Isaac, Pedro Pascal, and Jorge Ramos? And to my great surprise, it was me. Now, if you buy that, I have an interesting conspiracy theory for you that involves the deep state and how it allowed a business person of marginal talents at best to accumulate billions, then sit in the White House for 4 years, and still the deep state conspired to prevent him from being reelected or being able to run again. So same kind of story there, folks. Now, I am President and General Counsel of MALDEF and pleased to welcome you all to this first gala in Chicago since the fall of 2021. It's been a long time coming, but we are so pleased to see all of you here and to be reminded of how important the Midwest Latino community and its allies are to MALDEF today and in the future. Those who are unfamiliar with MALDEF, we are, as I said, a now 55-year-old national civil rights organization. We opened our doors in 1968 in San Antonio, Texas, after efforts by Latino leaders from throughout the Southwest and here in Chicago to create an organization modeled very consciously on the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund, which a decade and a half earlier had the monumental achievement of Brown versus Board. Today, after 55 years, MALDEF is known as the Latino legal voice for civil rights in America. Now, that is a particularly important capacity today because I remind us all that it has now been over 20 years since January of 2003 that Latinos have been the largest minority group in the United States. Not remarked on in the mainstream media, but it was in January of 2003, over 2 decades ago, that the Census Bureau announced that Latinos had surpassed our brothers and sisters in the Black community to become the largest minority group in the country. The problem is, not only was that 20-year anniversary not remarked upon, but if you look at the levels of representation for our community in leadership across the board, we are woefully underrepresented even as our community continues to grow. But we know that the history of our community is one of resilience and activism in the face of challenges like this ongoing level of underrepresentation. We are known as the Latino legal voice for civil rights because of what we have done in the past, what we do in the present, and what we will do in the future. I remind those who are not aware or who do not recall that MALDEF was responsible for the 1982 monumental Supreme Court victory in Clyler versus Doe, a decision by a split court that guaranteed the right of every child to attend free public school from kindergarten through 12th grade, regardless of their immigration status. This was a case undertaken by our predecessors at MALDEF at great peril and with no guarantee of victory. It's easy to look back and assume that this was a foregone conclusion. I assure you it was not. But 41 years later, the anniversary was last week, 41 years later, Plyler versus Doe is established law as a result of the efforts of MALDEF. But even though we are 55, which for some would be an early retirement age, MALDEF is nowhere near retirement because the screaming need for the service that we provide, using our legal system to defend the rights of all, but particularly of the Latino community, is as much needed today as ever in our history. And we continue to make great progress. Just this week, and it's only Thursday, as they say, just this week we had a victory after a jury trial in Washington State on behalf of 3 Latino public works employees who faced daily harassment and discrimination on the job. Among the evidence presented in that jury trial was the presence of a figure demonstrating a lynching on a supervisor's desk that our clients, confined to one crew, were referred to as Manuel labor. Get it? Manual labor, Manuel labor. This is what they had to face. But a jury in a Washington federal court on Tuesday rather, Monday was a holiday, of course, Tuesday ruled in favor of our clients and awarded $600,000 to them for the harassment that they had faced. And yesterday, we reached a tentative settlement in yet another of our many cases challenging banks and credit unions that refuse to allow DACA holders young immigrants with work authorization protected from removal. But too many banks and other financial institutions refuse to even consider loan applications, and in a handful of cases, even opening bank accounts for these individuals because of their DACA status. We reached a settlement, tentative settlement yesterday in yet another of these cases. We already have settled prior cases. One right now is in the process of seeking claims from class members. And this latest settlement will once more get $1 million out to the community of young immigrants who faced discrimination from these financial institutions. Tonight, we are here not just to recognize our history and our continued efforts, but to acknowledge and honor 3 individuals whose lives, professions, actions epitomize the mission of MALDEF through its 55 years of existence. Our mission is to promote the civil rights of all Latinos living in the United States, with a recognition that that means defending the constitutional and civil rights of all Americans, regardless of their race. The 3 individuals we honor tonight have made immeasurable contributions, united by their commitment to those principles of equality and fairness for all. Tonight we begin with the great honor I have of introducing MALDEF's first esteemed honoree for the evening. Sadly, this award is posthumous, a recognition of the Honorable Manuel Barbosa, Chairman of the Illinois Human Rights Commission, tonight the recipient of MALDEF's Lifetime Achievement Excellence in Legal Service Award. Manuel Barbosa was born in Mexico, entering the United States on a raft across the Rio Grande when he was a few months old, an experience repeated by so many today. By age 6, he was helping his family pick cotton in the hot Texas sun. He became a naturalized citizen as a young child, and his family moved to Illinois. His early life as an undocumented child who spoke only Spanish, his years as a migrant worker, and his family's struggles as Americans inspired him to become an advocate, a lawyer, a human rights activist, and ultimately a judge. Barbosa earned his bachelor's degree in literature from Benedictine University. He had several different jobs, including as a teacher, before earning his law degree from John Marshall Law School in Chicago. He was the first Latino hired as a Kane County Assistant State's Attorney and later went into private practice in Elgin. Barbosa became a U.S. bankruptcy judge in the Northern District of Illinois, where he served for 15 years. He was the first chairman of the Illinois Human Rights Commission when it was created under Governor James Thompson, and he served for an astonishing 18 years. He served as chairman of the Kane County Zoning Board of Appeals, on the board of directors for the visitors of the Northern Illinois University School of Law, the Centro de Información, and of METRA. Barbosa finished his term on the METRA board, then decided to return to his work with the State Human Rights Commission. Governor J.B. Pritzker nominated Barbosa to the Human Rights Commission for a second term in June 2021. Please join me in taking a look at the video profile MALDEF has created for Judge Barbosa.
I think his drive in helping others was probably from growing up as probably a farm worker, a child of farm working families, seeing others struggle, seeing others sacrifice to make sure that their children that got opportunities that maybe they didn't have. And I think he saw that growing up. And so he wanted to see people around him later on in life that maybe were in the same situation he was when he was growing up, also have those opportunities and maybe make sure that there was someone there to advocate for them, to defend them, to look for injustices of which they were victims. So I think he picked up a lot of that from his farm working years, maybe seeing other people's suffering. And also, my parents were very compassionate in that, even though we were from a very humble family, humble beginnings, they always taught us to give back to the community. And no matter where we were at in our lives, that there's always somebody that you can help or extend that compassion to.
And I can just begin by saying that one of the accomplishments was that he became a lawyer. An accomplishment not just because he became a lawyer, but because, again, his commitment to community really defined the kind of lawyer that he was going to be. I'm sure that he had many opportunities to go after positions that would be profitable, but I think that he always kept the betterment of the community first.
I think Manny is definitely very impressive. I mean, he was over 6 feet tall, handsome, but he is definitely what I would call a Renaissance man. He has everything. He's, the charming personality, the intellect, the knowledge of history. He plays the guitar and sings. He can do, and he is a wonderful speaker, and is just so open, and has always been so open to everything in the world. And then, of course, his leadership. He is a leader and has been a leader in his community, on the commission, and everywhere that he's been.
One of the first things that he did was open up his office, and he helped Latinos in his area, not just his city, but in the area around there. And and I know, now he didn't say anything to me, he wouldn't say anything to me, but I do know that some of those folks couldn't afford to pay him, but he would do it anyway. He would take care of them, and he took care of the community incredibly. He did so much for the community. They loved him. He was very quiet. He wouldn't share it with everybody else, but he was one of the special people, and he took care of people. He won a lot. He made sure that they and their children, their wives, were well taken care of.
Me voy pa'l pueblo, hoy es mi día, voy a alegrar todo el alma mía. Me voy pa'l pueblo, hoy es mi día, voy a alegrar toda el alma mía.
As I said, it is to MALDEF's regret that this is a posthumous award. But on behalf of the Barbosa family and representing the judge's legacy, I note an extraordinary legacy of service on the bankruptcy court, where there are daily important opportunities to recognize common humanity and the constitutionally protected right of everyone to a fresh start, to his direct work, pioneering work on the Illinois Human Rights Commission, representing the legacy of Judge Barbosa and his tremendous contributions. Please give a warm welcome to two of his children, Cristina and Vincent Barbosa.
All right. I'd like to start by thanking MALDEF for giving my family, our friends, and I the honor of representing my father here tonight. We all recognize the incredible work MALDEF does to advocate for the disadvantaged, which is the cause my father dedicated his life's work to. My father himself once said, "The road towards justice in America is marked with signposts of court cases brought by dedicated lawyers who recognize that justice is not a place, but rather a road upon which we must constantly advance the unfinished promise of America." MALDEF, through its commitment to education and advocacy, is truly advancing that promise. I thank you for recognizing my father as a role model in this fight, as well as for stepping up to carry on this important work so that the next generation may go even further. Thank you.
We will be forever grateful for all of the efforts of Judge Barbosa, for his service to the entire nation, and for making sure that Latinos are always represented and protected. Now it is my great pleasure to introduce a MALDEF leader who follows in the line of so many others of great accomplishment. When I think of the Chicago Regional Councils for MALDEF, extending back to 1980 when this regional office was opened, I am filled with pride. We have among our former regional council federal judges, state leaders, and leaders of the bar. Two of them are here tonight, and I want to acknowledge Mariel Valdez and Patricia Mendoza, both judicial officers. And thank them for being with us tonight. But it is now my great honor to introduce our current Chicago Regional Counsel, someone who clearly follows in line with the tremendous accomplishments of her predecessors, someone who daily leads the office in serving the ever-growing Latino population of the Midwest, who represents us in speaking to authorities in multiple states, in demanding of those authorities, demanding of those with power that they acknowledge and recognize the growing Latino community. Someone who I am proud to call a colleague. Please welcome to the stage our Midwest Regional Counsel, Griselda Vega Samuel.
Well, thank you, Tom. That was very lovely. I really appreciate those words. And I really want to thank you for being a mentor, a friend, and someone I can always call on. So thank you. Well, buenas tardes, good evening. Bienvenidos to MALDEF's 2023 Gala. So thank you so much for joining us. It's wonderful to see so many friendly faces and so many new faces out here. It really fills my heart with pride to really have all of you wonderful people with us. So we are very excited to have the opportunity to come together once again and celebrate MALDEF's great work, as well as honor some of the Midwest special honorees. We already heard about Judge Barbosa, and we're going to hear about some really great honorees in a little bit. But I want to take a little time to really just share some highlights. And I have written remarks in the program, so please take a look. But I really want to take the opportunity to share with you some of the great work that Tom's already referenced, because as he said, the Midwest, we are a voice, Latinos are a voice across this great region. And having lived out in New York and having lived out in Washington State, people forget about us sometimes in the Midwest, but we do great things and we're a burgeoning community here and we have a lot to say So I'm glad to share some of those thoughts with you. So I know, or I'm going to share some of the highlights. So just several weeks ago, many of you in this room actually joined us in celebrating MALDEF's Midwest office brand new hogar, and we had a wonderful time. And really, the office is located right across City Hall, and we look forward to not only hosting our partners, but also to the community. We want everyone to know that it is a place, it is a resource, and that we're here to help. So we want to really say, que todos sean bienvenidos. Now, I want to talk a little bit about our litigation docket. We had a huge win in our case against the state of Arkansas. Now, there, the court found that Arkansas's voter restriction law was unconstitutional. Now, this law restricts the ability of a volunteer to assist more than 6 voters or face stiff penalties and jail time. Now, why is this important? Because there's a growing Latino community, and especially voters in Arkansas, that have and need language access. And so when they aren't able to choose the person that they can help them cast their vote, that's an issue. And so we fought, we took on the state of Arkansas, and we won. Now, yes. Now, of course, the state of Arkansas has appealed. But the MALDEF team looks forward to continuing that fight at the 8th Circuit Court of Appeals, so more to come. Now, MALDEF also continues to protect our hard-working Latinas by representing 6 women in their case against a pig farm in rural Indiana. As I mentioned, we're not just an Illinois office, we're a Midwest office, right? So Arkansas, Indiana. Now, these women, they worked daily in a daily production line where they delivered up to 60 sows per day, castrating an average of 720 piglets per day. Much of this repetitive work that was done while having to work on their knees in horrendous conditions, moving from piglet to piglet. Now, these tasks were the worst jobs. They were always assigned to the Latinas, even though they were injured from that repetitive stress motion and high production line, and had requested a change in their assignment. They were ignored. Now, these women suffered discrimination, sexual harassment, as well as a hostile work environment and retaliation. The Mexican consulate in Chicago was the one who referred this case. And I want to share this because it's a prime example of the importance of partnerships. And MALDEF continues to be a resource not only for those partners, but for our clients and their community. Now, on the policy front, MALDEF continues to advocate and protect the rights of Latinos in the Midwest. MALDEF closely monitored and testified at the Illinois legislature's redistricting listening sessions that were being held to assist in the creation of a district map that would elect a new Chicago Public School elected school board. Now, why is that important? It's important because the Chicago Public School Board looks to become the largest and the most powerful elected school board in the country. So MALDEF was watching. MALDEF testified, and we submitted a demonstrative map to ensure Latinos are able to elect their candidate of choice, who will best represent our Latino family interest. Now, ultimately, the legislature extended their deadline to draw that new map till April 2024. But MALDEF will continue to maintain that vigilance throughout that process because our families deserve to be heard and have someone who will vote and protect our family's best interest. Now, I'm very excited and proud of what we as a team and as a community have accomplished. I want to take a moment to recognize the members of MALDEF's Midwest office My team is one of my team members isn't here, but I want to recognize all of them by name. Martin Klein, Irene Padilla, Susana Sandoval Vargas, Juan Vasquez, and our newest member of the MALDEF Midwest team, Jaime Nolasco, as well as all of our current and past interns. So if you meet, please stand up. I know there's more interns out there. For former interns, I know who you are. So thank you to all of them. Without all of these amazing colleagues, none of this important work would be possible. Now, the work of MALDEF's Midwest office continues, but we have not done it alone. And we are grateful to all of our partnerships that we had fostered both locally, regionally, and nationwide to make sure that Latinos continue to have their rights protected. As we look to the coming year, building on our hard work and dedication, together, everybody in this room and everybody outside of this room, together we're going to be making sure that we will make our Latino voices heard today and tomorrow. So, gracias y que siga la fiesta.
Now it is my great pleasure to introduce our next honoree this evening, someone I'm proud to call a friend, Dr. Maria de los Angeles Nena Torres. Distinguished Latin American and Latino Studies professor at the University of Illinois, Chicago, and tonight the recipient of MALDEF's Lifetime Achievement Excellence in Community Service Award. In the early 1960s, at the age of 6, Maria de los Angeles Torres was one of over 14,000 Cuban miners sent to the United States in Operation Pedro Pan, a U.S.-led rescue for children whose parents opposed the government of Fidel Castro. Torres brings a historical and personal perspective to her current research on contemporary issues of immigration and citizenship in America. Given what we have seen over the last 6 years at the border and beyond, her personal experience, searing as it is certainly instructive as to what we as a nation need to do collectively today. She also has expertise in U.S.-Cuban relations, Latino politics, Latin American political thought, and youth politics in the Americas. Torres also served as the first executive director of the Mayor's Advisory Commission on Latino Affairs for the city of Chicago between 1983 and 1987. She went on to teach political science at DePaul University for 18 years. During that time, she was also a faculty associate at Notre Dame's Institute for Latino Studies and a research fellow at Chapin Hall University of Chicago. Professor Torres has been with the University of Illinois Chicago since 2005, serving as director of the UIC Latin American and Latino Studies program, and then of the Inter-University Program for Latino Research. IUPLR is one of the leaders nationwide for the entire Latino community. She has written extensively on Latinos, Cuba, and Cuban exiles, and has authored In the Land of Mirrors, The Politics of Cuban Exiles in the United States, and The Lost Apple, Operation Pedro Pan, Cuban Children in the U.S., and The Promise of a Better Future. She has recently completed a manuscript, The Elusive Present, Democracy's Time in Cuban Thought, and she is an interdisciplinary scholar who has contributed to art history projects, including compiling a virtual collection of 100 years of Chicago Latino art, and the Chicago Latino Art Virtual Gallery. Please join me in taking a look at the video MALDEF has produced to pay tribute to Nena's important work.
My first impression of Nena was that she was a really powerful, unapologetic Latina scholar, really brilliant. I was in awe of the way that she carried herself, her classroom, how she led discussions, all her knowledge. Every time I was in class with Nena, I left really deep in thought and learning something new. She had a way of knowing the strengths that we had as students and really helping us not only with our academic journey, but also in our life.
I think that Dr. Torres is driven by the courage of our people and, of course, her love of learning. Her story as an immigrant is a testament of persevering through adversity. Her personal ties to Latin America and her experience as an educator, she proudly fuels a pipeline of leaders every day.
What I think drives Nena is a desire to see major change on a number of fronts. I think she wants to see communities that are disempowered, that are poor, that are ethnic racial minorities, really move forward on all number of levels, especially educational. And I also think she wants to see the scholarship of these communities elevated and advanced. She wants people who are doing scholarship on Latinx communities to be recognized and to be supported in their work and not to be marginalized. That's something that's really important for Nena.
I think Nena is driven by a combination of personal and academic motivation. So personally, she has told the story of how she left Cuba when she was 6 years old as part of the Operation Pedro Pan, which was an unprecedented program that brought together something like 14,000 unaccompanied children from Cuba. And how that experience led her eventually to write a book about not only her own personal background, but many others that she met throughout her research. A lot of her work, again, centers on the experience of being an exile or part of the diaspora, as she now calls it, and the importance of keeping those ties between the homeland and the diaspora is something that she has written about very eloquently.
Nena, I think it's amazing that she was the first person to work with Harold Washington on, organizing Latino voices and advocacy and having a Latino voice in the city of Chicago. I think that's extraordinary at a time in the 1980s when that had not happened before. To build something out of scratch is amazing. Since then, she's done many other things, but I always remind myself of that when I'm in a room with her. She did that, and she was the first Latina to do that.
I think Nena's accomplishments, they're hard to quantify because I don't think there's any beginning or end to them. I think she opens up a space of intellectual curiosity, academic rigor, really always opening up a conversation that is always looking to the past, but then also the present and the future, and trying to see a better way forward for all of us. So Nena's accomplishments, I think, distinguished academic career, wonderful family, important work that resonates with our community. So I think we have a very personal connection with Nena, what she means to us as Cubans, as Cuban Americans, and then I think it's what she offers to everyone, what transcends nationality, ethnicity, race. It's just she's very much, it's always what she's contributing to the conversation, I think, is what Nena, when I think of what Nena offers and what she's been able to accomplish. I think Nena's legacy for me will always be that is a fearless, unquestioning, brilliant Cuban woman that I will always look to and be proud of, and proud to know her, and proud that she's in my life.
So, as you can see, Nena for decades has been and continues to be at the center of two of the most critical issues for the Latino community in the nation, immigration and higher education. Please join me in congratulating Maria de Los Angeles, Nena Torres.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. Okay, so you made me cry. All right, so first of all, I want to say congratulations to our fellow awardees, those who are not here, and Jesse. We've crossed paths in I don't know how many fights in this city, and it's always been a good crossing of paths. I would like to start with special thanks to Tom Sines. Tom, you're shepherding MALDEF in what has turned out to be an incredibly tricky and politically dangerous times that we're living in. And I think we started working closely during the first years of the Obama administration when there were unprecedented deportations and anti-immigrant feelings and sentiments in the country that have only gotten worse, but that the doors were open then. You helped us bring resources to our undocumented students in a way that were very needed because we were trying to get students to be able to graduate, and you were critical in helping us in that fight. We at UIC are particularly grateful to you for this. I'm a very lucky person. I have had great mentors in my life. My mother, who taught me the love of ideas and social justice. Franklin Garcia, I don't know anybody here, maybe from Texas. Juan Andrade, you may remember. Franklin Garcia, a legendary labor organizer who taught me a lot about organizing. And Frank Bonilla, scholar and a founder of El Centro de Estudios Puertorriqueños at CUNY, who taught me how to organize higher ed institutions that could produce new ideas, because at the end of the day, policies are driven by the ways that people think that who we are and what we need. And if we don't change those ideas, we can't really get policies that we need. Also, Pastora San Juan Cafferty, who tried to teach me to be an elegant advocate. I don't think I learned that lesson all as well as she carried it. I have also had the honor to work with institutions that are truly care about communities, social justice, and democracy. As such, my work also reflects the commitment and support of these institutions. They have included, among others, UIC, where we like to say we don't need to reach out to the community because the community is in our classrooms. And Harold Washington Administration, an extraordinary time in the history of Chicago, and MALDEF. Okay, I did have a part-time job in MALDEF. Now, these have not always been harmonious relationships, as there are always struggles within institutions as to priorities and strategies. As a graduate student at St. Mary's University in San Antonio, I was part of a group of students working with MALDEF, doing research that supported voting rights cases and challenges to the Voting Rights Act. It was the summer of 1976, I believe. I'm not a historian, so it may have been 75 or 77. And the Houston police officers, all white, killed 17 young Chicanos. Despite overwhelming evidence of police misconduct, the all-white grand jury did not indict any of them. We wanted MALDEF to pursue civil rights claims against them. Police brutality was perceived to be a fringe issue, and for other reasons, including the juggling of priorities and resources for, at the time, a young organization, MALDEF decided not to. We were persistent. It wasn't elegant at that time either. And those of us pressuring were dismissed from our jobs. I share this with you, not because I'm going to do any kind of job discrimination claims or anything, But I share this with you because we're all today working together. And the fact that we are indicates the deepening of a social movement in the Latino community. Despite, or perhaps because of the times we are living in, there's a greater cohesion and acceptance of multiple issues, including those that were considered marginal at the time. Today, issues of inequality, police brutality, and anti-immigration and anti-LGBT policies have become part of the broader Latino civil rights agenda alongside voting rights and educational opportunities. Times are more difficult. We're not in an expansive society claiming for inclusion for our communities. We're now facing a movement to eject us from hard-won spaces that we have succeeded in obtaining in the last 7 decades. It is a different struggle, and we're trying to figure out how to do this as effectively as possible. However, I believe we're better positioned to wage a defense. We have a coherent and inclusive agenda shared by community activists, scholars, civil rights organizations, as is evidenced here today. And MALDEF is a critical component of this. I'm very proud to receive this award in recognition of the work I continue to do with community-based organizations, universities, and in the trenches of ideas here in Chicago and now in Miami as well, because I'm spending part of the year there. And in closing, I want to recognize the support of my colleagues and students at UIC, my husband, Matt Pierce, who's a past recipient of the legal award that Jesse's about to receive, as well as my daughters and now my granddaughter. Thank you.
Again, Nana, for your dedication to empowering the Latino community and for deepening our knowledge of the Latino diaspora. Now, I want to assure you all that we didn't program this, but I recognize that in the past, MALDEF has made decisions deemed wise at the time that may not have always anticipated the future needs of our community. But I am proud to announce to you all what I've announced before, but we have created in the last 2 years a 5th program area. This one is focused on open and obvious bias and racism. It is in part designed to, for the first time, permit MALDEF to delve gingerly at first into the issues of police brutality that continue to afflict our community as much as any other. So, Nana, you are ahead of your time. It is now my great pleasure to introduce someone else who's ahead of his time, our final awardee tonight. This award goes to a longtime legal leader who has been, at least in part, I believe, defined by his involvement with MALDEF, and that is Jesse Reese, the General Counsel and Chief Compliance Officer with the Vistria Group. Now, you all probably know his bio, but prior to joining Vistria, Jesse Reese was the Deputy Governor for Education in the office of Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker, where he oversaw the state's education system from early childhood through higher education, including 852 school districts, 48 community colleges, and 12 public universities, as well as the Illinois Student Assistance Commission and the Abraham Lincoln Presidential Library and Museum. Jesse had also previously served as the interim CEO of Chicago Public Schools. and lived to tell about it. Prior to serving as deputy governor, Dries was a partner in the corporate and securities group of Drinker, Biddle and Reith, LLP, now known as Fager, Drinkle, Biddle and Reith, LLP, where for 22 years, he focused his law practice on business transactions, including mergers and acquisitions, venture capital, and private equity investments, equity and debt offerings, financings, and a variety of commercial transactions. Dries also served as legal counsel to the Illinois Legislative Latino Caucus and the Illinois Legislative Latino Caucus Foundation. Jesse was on the American Bar Association's Commission on Hispanic Legal Rights and Responsibilities. He also served as president of the Hispanic Lawyers Association of Illinois, which is here tonight, as chairman of the Hispanic Lawyers Scholarship Fund of Illinois, and chairman of the Chicago Committee on Minorities in Large Law Firms. And he has served on the boards of the Chicago Legal Clinic, Metropolitan Planning Council, Erie Neighborhood Council, Chicago Commons, the Chicago Community Trust, and of course, first among equals, MALDEF. Now let me introduce someone who wants to tell you, in his own words, why MALDEF chose to honor Jesse Dries, another longtime MALDEF board member and leader of the Latino community in Chicagoland and beyond, the current CEO of Ion Tallship, Carlos Montoya. Carlos.
Good evening. I think it's important to put a Chicago touch on this evening. When you think about Chef Jose Andres, you think about Rita Moreno, think about Linda Ronstadt, think about Henry Cisneros, Dolores Huerta, we eulogize my own father, Eva Longoria. There's a new movie out, because you haven't seen it. Jesse is a son of Chicago. I mean, a real son of Chicago. This is a kid who grew up on the far south side of Chicago in the Roseland community. Cheer for the Roseland community. In the 1996 a novel or book, The Dreams of My Father, one of Jesse's law professor wrote about a community, a desperate, isolated community called Elkgeld Gardens, which I knew through my banking career as being the only banker who would go in that community. But just across a cesspool called the Water Reclamation Recovery Swamp is Roseland. I mean, it was a fine Dutch community in the war years, but families like Jesse's, immigrant Mexican families came in and they kept that. To this day, that community thrives. But this is as far as you can get in Chicago. And here's a guy who came up and went through school, and as General Counsel Thomas Sines mentioned today, so many different things. Jesse practically puts the E in MALDEF. If you look at all the different positions that Jesse has had, and I was serving on the board of MALDEF, thanks to Judge Patricia Mendoza, who recruited me. It's here for Judge Mendoza. Her son today happens to be my outside general counsel for Ion Digital, which is only the 6th U.S.-based company in the world to be publicly owned and majority owned by a Latino. So we're proud of that. And the law profession is never far behind because her son, Philip Azevedo, is a attorney in the law firm of Croak Fairchild Duarte, which is the only law firm in Chicago that has a named partner that is a Latina, Lisa Duarte. So it's a small world. All of these things ultimately come together, and we're so proud tonight to see Jesse, who has done us all right. It's amazing. He's probably the youngest guy ever in Chicago to be called an elder statesman because he has covered so many bases for all of us. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Tom, to make the official recognition.
Thank you, Carlos. Always a pleasure to welcome you to the stage. Now, join me in enjoying the video that MALDEF created as a tribute to Jesse Ruiz.
It's an honor to pay tribute to a great Illinois public servant, Jesse Ruiz. I've known Jesse for 30 years, and when I first took office in 2019, he was willing to give up a lucrative legal practice and agreed to join me as Deputy Governor for Education. He built our education team from the ground up, and he made a meaningful difference for the people of Illinois, from cradle to career. Our state is so much stronger because of his work. I'm incredibly proud of what he accomplished as Deputy Governor of Illinois and how he helped lead Illinois through a life-altering pandemic. Our state's teachers, administrators, and parents all looked to him for his expertise, and through that challenge, Jesse worked to keep our youngest Illinoisans safe and in school. Jesse has always built an impressive legacy, and as his favorite poem says, he's striving to make lives breathe easier. His personal story, filled with perseverance and resilience, has guided Jesse to make an impact everywhere he goes. I could not be more proud to have him on my team and the leadership that he displayed for our state, and he has remained a lifelong friend.
So I think part of what drives Jesse is definitely the memory of his father and the lessons that his father taught him about coming to this country and the hardship that he endured. So I think that Jesse still thinks every day about how he does his father proud. Jesse is certainly motivated by his cultural and ethnic pride, and he displays that in a lot of different ways. I remember we know his service and his legacy, particularly in the area of education. There was a time when he was board chair of the Illinois State Board of Education in a local school district. This is going back at least 20 years ago, if not more. A local school district said that they were not going to enroll undocumented children into their school, a suburban school district. And that's against the law, right? All children are supposed to be entitled to that education. And I'll never forget, it's front page news back when everybody read the newspapers, where Jesse said if the school does not comply, he's going to take away all of their state and federal funding. So no holds barred, Jesse threw down the gauntlet and said, not on my watch. And I think that's just a significant display of, significant display about how Jesse is willing to be a fighter and willing to fight for what's right and just.
He has been a friend, and more importantly, somebody I've worked with throughout my tenure as mayor. I've entrusted Jesse as mayor with the school system and the park districts, two of the things I am most proud about. He has been a wingman during a very challenging but transformational period of the Chicago Public Schools. Things that we can be proud of, seeing our graduation rate go from 56% to 84%, doubling our kids' reading and math capacities, or nearly doubling it. Jesse Ruiz has been at the helm, making sure that Chicago Public Schools and Chicago Public School children were the first priority for the city of Chicago. The results bear it out, and we will never really know all the futures that were touched because of the hard work, determination, grit, and both persistence and perspiration by Jesse Ruiz. He has been a constant in my tenure as mayor. More importantly, he's been a constant in our civic life of our city. He's a great citizen of the city of Chicago. He's a good friend to all of us. He wouldn't be receiving this honor if he didn't earn it, because of the people's lives he has touched and his commitment to serving others. So nobody is more worthy of this recognition and this honor than Jesse Ruiz.
So he clearly needs no introduction. Please congratulate Jesse Reese.
All right, the teleprompter says Ruiz remarks unscripted, and in fact they are, because I thought the video was going to do all my talking tonight, but inevitably, lawyers we can squeak out a few words. So of course, thank you to MALDEF for this incredible honor, and of course, congratulations to my fellow honorees. I am blessed to have the honor and privilege of knowing Judge Barbosa, honor and privilege of knowing Nena, and as was noted, my dad came here from Mexico with a third grade education as a migrant farm laborer as part of the Bracero program in 1943. And from 43 to 47, he was bent over in fields all across the United States picking crops until he was jumped ship and was here undocumented in Chicago, working on the railroads, working in steel mills, working to construct the Prudential building, which I now have the privilege of seeing from our offices every day. Believe it or not, his government took some of those meager wages that he was earning on farms all across America in the 40s. And it took an incredible lawyer named Matt Pierce to sue. And when my dad was in his 90s, I think he got like $1,000 back or something. But thank you, Matt. Setting a very high bar for lawyers to take on huge challenges and give a man in his 90s an honor and privilege. Being a part of a class action suit to seek justice. So that is the honor and privilege that I've had in my career and in my life to honor my mother and father who came here as immigrants and, like so many others, try to build a better life, sacrifice their own lives on behalf of their children. But it was organizations like MALDEF. And so when I graduated from the University of Illinois in '88, came back to Chicago after 4 years away in Urbana, what did I discover? They welcomed me back and get me involved in civic life in Chicago, but the MALDEF Leadership Development Program that I quickly jumped onto and had the privilege of being introduced to MALDEF back in the late '80s and getting to know MALDEF when I was working in the steel industry, getting to know about their mission. However, I did not know until I took Barack Obama's class in law school about a landmark case, Plyler v. Doe, as Tom reminded me, that just celebrated 41 years, that MALDEF wrought out of Texas that gave undocumented children the unequivocal right to a free public education in this country, regardless of immigration status. So as Sylvia mentioned, it was actually in 2006. And I hate to call out people, but it was Elmwood Park who was denying admission to undocumented students. And when they came before the Illinois State Board of Education, which I had the privilege of chairing at the time, I remembered the case I learned in Barack's class, or President Obama's class, Plyler v. Doe. And I remembered it was my friends at MALDEF who brought that case, who provided that precedent that I could rely upon, that I learned from Professor Obama, that I could use in saying, no, this is not correct. They have constitutional rights, regardless of their immigration status, and the state of Illinois is going to enforce them. And that is now codified into Illinois law. And so, thank you to MALDEF for that case 41 years ago and the many, many cases that you've heard about tonight, that they continue to build great precedent for all of us to rely upon to benefit from and to cite the next time we see an injustice happening in our communities, that we call it out. And having legal precedent on your side is always a good thing. So, of course, nobody does anything alone. And I am blessed to have a support system, including phenomenal colleagues at the Vistria Group, which is my dream job, frankly, a private investment firm that focuses on not only, of course, returning a profit for our investors, but also providing impact on our world in which we're living in, and trying to make sure that we can do both equally as well. And so thank you to my colleagues, Stephanie Solomon, John Samuels, and Kip and Sarah Kirkpatrick for being with me tonight, supporting our efforts, supporting MALDEF, and again, providing me the dream job of being able to lawyer, do business, and do policy and do great work in the community that is so important to me. And thanks to our partners at Ropes and Gray, Winston and Strawn, Sperling and Slater, Simpson and Thatcher, and of course, my professional home for 22 years, and my friends who are here with me tonight, Faegre, Drinker, Biddle, and Reith, for always supporting me. And mentees who've gone on to other places like Exelon and United Airlines and ADM and other places that are having impact in all of their respective places of work and in our community. And of course, my family that has supported me in everything I do. Jonathan, Benjamin, my two sons, that I'm so grateful that they got to know my father and my mother, who unfortunately are no longer with us. But I know they will take those lessons of the sacrifices that they made in prioritizing education. Again, my dad would always say, you have two choices in this world, kid. You can work with your back or you can work with your head. I was never given the choice. I'll give it to you, do what you want with it. It's like, I'll be gone, and you'll have to be in this world on your own. And thankfully, I took his admonishment. Not always, but I generally took it. And I hope they continue to take his admonishment and do some great things with that gift of education. And of course, my wife, Michelle, who is my rock and the wind beneath my wings, and makes everything has made everything possible since the day I met her in my first year of law school. I even got some of her outlines to some of those classes that she had before me. So truly made everything possible. And so I thank her for all her support in all of the things I choose to do, even the crazy idea of serving as interim CEO of CPS. So thank you all for your generous support of MALDEF. Senator Aquino, thank you for being with us tonight, and the judges who are here and other public and elected officials. Thank you so much for the support that you give this great organization so that it can continue to serve our community and each and every one of us. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse, again, for all you continue to do for Latinos, not just here, but nationwide. The number of firsts is ongoing for our community, and every one of them is of such great significance. So thank you all for being here tonight. We've come to the near close of the evening. Thank you for sticking with us, but I think that what you got in return was some incredibly inspirational remarks and thoughts, and really, I hope, strength and energy for the fight to come, because it is coming. But as every event like this, I begin my remarks by thanking those responsible for the evening. So let me first, as usual, thank our terrific MC, Oscar Pedro Jorge Ramos, for all of his leadership. But seriously, I do want to thank this, like all of our events, what we welcome leaders of MALDEF, present and past and future. And among those are our board members, the board members who had the initiative and understanding to create an endowment, to create a new program focused on open and obvious bias and racism. Some of them are here tonight, both present and past board members, and I'd like them to each stand up and receive our gratitude for your continued leadership of this organization. Please stand. And Griselda, our terrific leader of this region, already named our current staff in the Midwest Regional Office, but I recognize that here we have tonight many former staff members of MALDEF and leaders who continue to contribute in their current professions, their current positions, to the broader goal of promoting the civil rights of all Latinos living in the United States. So would all of our former and current MALDEF staff members please stand? So putting together an event like this is never easy. I want to name by specifically the folks responsible for organizing this evening, including Gina Montoya, Jesus Verduzco, Jessica Barona, Brian Gomez, Jose Delgado, our other vice president here tonight, Sandra Hernandez, and Julie Gallego, all of them. Please thank them for contributing to tonight's successful event. And of course, I want to recognize once more and thank them for what they do and for being with us tonight, our tremendous honorees, the late pioneering and committed Judge Manuel Barbosa, the insightful and inspiring Nena Torres, and the wise and accomplished Jesse Ruiz. Jesse's comments about his father in his 90s and the late recognition of the violation of rights and principles through the Bracero program is about not the money, but it's about dignity and recognition that the Braceros, through their contributions to our country, are as deserving as any other group to be acknowledged for their service and their leadership and for their sacrifice, a sacrifice in the form of the denial of basic constitutional rights. That struggle, decades long, in the case of the Braceros, continues today for our community. I want to spend a few moments talking about the challenge to come. Now, some of you may be like me. I have become accustomed to spending my mornings earlier in California, mercifully a little later here this morning, but my June mornings, or at least a selection of them, online, waiting to learn what the United States Supreme Court has decided on critical cases before it. Today was a decision day, so I was up at the much more merciful hour of 9 a.m. here to see if that was a decision rendered today. It was not. But the fact is that tomorrow, another decision day, or sometime next week, the United States Supreme Court will announce its decision in two cases challenging the continued use of race-conscious affirmative action in higher education admissions. Two cases out of Harvard and the University of North Carolina will be decided this month by our Supreme Court. And it will be not a news flash to anyone to know that we expect tomorrow or next week that following up on its decision a year ago to overturn 49 years of precedent in Roe versus Wade to undermine the rights of women to reproductive choice in this country, that it will follow that up this year, this Supreme Court majority, by likely overturning the 45-year-old precedent in Bakke versus University of California that recognized not just the legality, but the importance of taking account of race, given the searing effects, continuing impacts of racial discrimination in this country. Now, when the Supreme Court majority does this further damage, the media will focus on our brothers and sisters in the Black community. But in this room, we must leave tonight with a clear understanding that the coming assault by these justices on affirmative action is an attack on the Latino community. Even 45 years ago, in the Bakke case, 1978, what was challenged was a program at the UC Davis Medical School that in its history to that date in 1978 had admitted more Latinos than Blacks to the medical school under its challenged affirmative action program, even 45 years ago. When you add to that the California, my home state, when it foolishly enacted Proposition 209 some 27 years ago to eliminate race-conscious affirmative action in California public universities, most notably UC Berkeley and UCLA. The primary proponent of that initiative, Ward Connerly, a regent of the University of California, later admitted to a reporter that the reason he promoted Proposition 209 was because of his obsession with the growing Latino community in California and his ungrounded belief that Latinos did not deserve affirmative action consideration. His primary motivation, again, was us 27 years ago. It is also no accident that the last time the Supreme Court faced challenges while funded by white right-wing extremists to affirmative action was in cases coming out of the University of Texas at Austin. Not a coincidence, because that challenge enabled the opponents of equal opportunity to argue that for Latinos who had attained representation at UT Austin in the 20%, had achieved sufficient admission to accomplish diversity and should no longer be permitted consideration on an affirmative action program. They picked the university because of the size of our population. Hasten to add that while Latinos had representation in the 20s at UT Austin, they were over 50% of high school seniors in the entire state of Texas at the time. So representation at less than half your proportion in those eligible for admission was, by the reverse discrimination proponents, no longer legitimate enough for consideration under affirmative action. 45 years ago, 27 years ago, a decade ago, the assault on affirmative action in this country from its beginning has been as much an assault on the Latino community as on any other. But that is not a story you will hear in the media when the conservative majority renders their decision. But I can assure you today, in 2023, Ed Blum and his allies, the right-wing challengers over decades to affirmative action, I can assure you that today they are concerned about our community because of our growth and our absolute essential core position for this country in its future. We know, because they've not been very good about hiding it, that there are folks, including folks in leadership in this country, who subscribe to the so-called Great Replacement theory. That theory, though never expressly acknowledged by the media, is again about us in the Latino community. We are the growing community. We are not just the community that 20 years ago became the largest minority group in the country. We are also the community that today is on the cusp of exceeding the largest proportional representation of any single minority group in the entire history of the United States. I'll repeat it because the media has not told you this. But at 19% of the population, Latinos match the highest proportion of the population ever represented by a single minority group, which was at the beginning of our country's existence through the then enslaved Black community. So we are on the cusp of making a historical precedent, and they know it. The Great Replacement theory is about us. But even as those who promote that noxious, racist, historical mistake of a theory, even as those who promote it revile us, I am as concerned about those who abet, whether advertently or inadvertently, those extremists through exclusion and elision of our Latino community. They don't talk about us in the way that they should, given our importance to the future of this country. And when they studiedly ignore us, they serve the aims of the extremists who revile. When the Supreme Court issues its decision striking down affirmative action, we in the Latino community have a special responsibility whether acknowledged or not, to lead in ensuring that that decision's damage is limited and ultimately overcome. I want you to leave tonight remembering three things. No matter what the Supreme Court decides, it will have nothing to do with affirmative action in employment or contracting. Most important, I want you to remember that no matter what the Supreme Court decides, its decision will never be a mandate to ignore race or racial disparity in policymaking, in higher education, or any other arena. And third, I want you to remember that no matter what the Supreme Court majority imposes, it will have nothing to say about curriculum or the vital continuing importance of ethnic studies and even critical race theory. I say these three things because the day they decide, others will be given the ability, the microphone, to argue that this ends affirmative action in every area, including employment and contract. That this means that you cannot talk about race or consider racial disparity in making policy. That this is legal support from the Supreme Court for the assault seeking to eliminate ethnic studies. All of those are lies. But more important, perhaps most important, I need us all to commit that when this decision comes down, we will reach out and reassure every Black or Latino student in higher education today that they belong. Because immediately following this decision, there will be peers, there will be faculty who will suggest or say directly to Black and brown students in higher education that what the Supreme Court said means your seat here was unearned, that it was illegitimate, that you do not belong. And we must collectively, with our allies, resoundingly overwhelm those statements. You belong, regardless of the folly of the Supreme Court majority. I said we have a special burden, given our size and growth and impact on the future of this country, to confront the challenges of this forthcoming Supreme Court decision, to re-elevate the importance of equity of educational opportunity through deeper reforms of admissions criteria, of support for students enrolled, of efforts to ensure the graduation and success of every student. But I know, based on the history of MALDEF and our allies through 55 years, that we will lead in overcoming the foolish decision about to be rendered. We have 55 years of resilience and tenacity in support of our Constitution. 55 years of intellect and creativity in promoting civil rights. We have 55 years of sweat and principle to ensure that our country lives up to the principles that our history to date has marked more by their violation than their implementation. That is our history in the Latino community. And nothing done by 5 or 6 conservative justices will ever change the future of this country and of the Latino community so central to its development. Our history demonstrates that together with our allies, They can bring on Harvard. They can bring on UNC. They can bring on Dobbs. They can bring on whatever the next threat to voting rights before the court may be. But in the end, 5 or 6 justices cannot ever defeat the Latino community and its allies. Thank you all for being here tonight. We look forward to the continued struggle in collaboration with each and every one of you. Good night.